How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
I've been watching you talking to Jordan Hall. I feel like I've been watching you for a long time already today.
I haven't had a chance to respond, Mary, but thank you so much for what you said. The one comment you made was extremely helpful. And so.
Oh, you mean about wondering why anyone would have an objection?
Yeah, yeah. So.
Are you getting that?
No, but I was talking to Paul today. Oh, by the way, we spoke very highly of both of you, especially you, Mary. I was saying, well, I was concerned about the one analogy I drew, and Jordan had sort of stuck back and say, John is trying to do this, but it looks like in general people are responding, with charity. But nevertheless, I'm grateful for you saying what you said. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Yeah, well, sticks and stones may break my bones, but analogies never hurt me.
That's good. That's good.
Oh, all right, cool. One of the things I thought we could talk about was to come back on the issue of relevance realization in the ground of being, and
Sure.
if we can see any sort of personhood in there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking a lot about this in the past few weeks, especially using Emergence. Thank you again, John, by the way, for the book recommendations. Those were very useful.
Yeah, and I'm very, very interested in Emergence's thought, as you know. JP, I commented on it. I really liked the video you did, sort of trying to integrate Emergence's ideas with sort of my ideas about the bipolarity between emergence and emanation. I wanted to say right now that that's very, very close to how I was interpreting Emergence and why I was attracted to him. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to thank you for that. I thought what you did was very clear. You're already getting other people telling you that video was a very, very clear video, and I thought it was very well done. And Mary, thank you for the link you sent me. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet about the Emergence talks, but I will definitely do that.
Well, that professor thinks that Emergence should be up there with Thomas Aquinas and Augustine. She's very much into promoting his thinking.
I would too. And I mean, Emergence is going to figure in the After Socrates video because, I mean, what you see is dialectic of being taken up, right? First of all, it's written, the division of nature is written as a dialogue, right? So it's very much Socratic like that. But then the dialectic is, it's sort of the culmination of the Neoplatonic vision. It's not only between people and within thought, but it helps us ultimately conform to the structure of being itself. And so Emergence is definitely going to be in the After Socrates video series. So, I mean, thank you both, because it's very helpful to me.
Yeah, and I also want to right away mention, you made a great point. I think when you talked to Jonathan about Emergence, especially, that one of the reasons why you were reticent to associate Emergence with classical theism was that he was later persecuted as a heretic. Yeah,
which is usually good evidence that somebody's running afoul of classical theism.
Yeah. So as I was researching, Emergence in general, I also tried to see a few reasons why he was classified as a heretic. And I mean, because ideally, I would avoid being an heretic myself. So I tried to stay away from this. And there were a few accusations which came up. And as you raised also with Jonathan, it's not clear exactly why Emergence was persecuted as a heretic.
Yes. Yeah.
There's sort of comments all over the place.
Yeah.
One thing which showed up was the accusation of pantheism. But as I said in one of the videos, I think it's kind of a lazy accusation, because Emergence never tries to reduce God to anything. So
I think that's like when they accused Socrates of atheism and corrupting the youth.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of a stand-in for some, this is like paganism or something. So I suspect that's not the thing. I do suspect that the accusations had some sincerity in them, because he was thought of so highly before he presented the division of nature. So what I mean is, it's like, again, the evidence is so underdetermined, but it sounds like people were sort of shocked when he produced it, because he had such a people had such a high opinion of him going in. So I don't think they were out to get him initially. I don't think that's plausible either. So there's some aspect of his work that really, really stepped on people's toes, and his fall was precipitous. He was basically, you know, the court philosopher, the court theologian, and then he disappears. It's such an extreme fall. So
the professor that I was listening to today said, she made it sound like he was actually condemned many centuries or several centuries later, that it didn't sound to me like she was saying it was during his lifetime.
Yeah, I think so as well.
After the scholastic.
Oh, the official the official declaration of him as heresy comes later. But the idea is that, again, my understanding, and many people, it's like this, right? Is that somehow goes back to something that happened in his lifetime. That was my understanding. Because, like I said, he disappears, and he disappears under a sort of a cloud of suspicion.
Sort of my strategy to deal with this safely was to try to then bridge from Erigena to Saint Maximus the Confessor, because he's a safe figure because he's a saint, and he's also a pre-schism saint, so he's a saint in all traditions. So if I can make it there, it'll be safer at least.
That would be fair to Jonathan too, Jonathan Pajot, because Maximus is very much his hero.
I'm interested to agree with you when you talk to him.
Yeah, well, I really like that conversation. I mean, it got a little heady, and so hopefully we can make some good analogies for people who are watching, so that we don't get too lost in sort of concept space. I liked the discussion about relevance realization and Erigena and what that might mean. And Jonathan had this very extended notion of personhood, which I found actually I couldn't quite make. I was getting pieces of it, but I didn't quite see how it worked. And so, anyways,
I think this was also get to one of the reasons why Erigena was seen as at least suspiciously and ultimately condemned as a heretic is there's a distinction which it sort of emerges in especially the Christian East. There's a recent philosopher named David Brasha who has written about this. It's the distinction between essence and energies, especially in the Eastern Orthodox tradition. And apparently you can trace it all the way back to Saint Paul. In his writings, he is the first one to use the terms of energies only when talking about the actions or the manifestations of higher level beings like God or demons and so on. And it's a distinction which you can see also apparently in Saint Maximus, and this allows him to explain how you can have a vision of personhood with sort of very deep manifestations, and ultimately, one of the ways to see it maybe is in the West. There was as you point out, John, a natural supernatural distinction which became clearer and clearer, and then fully articulated with Saint Thomas Aquinas. Whereas in the East, instead of having a very clean-cut two-world mythology, it was always more of a continuous cosmos, where the distinction, let's say, between God's essence and his energies is not like at one level you have essence and then at the other level you have energies. The energies sort of always recede. It always depends on where you stand and how you can look at it. So even anytime we can start with something simpler, maybe like when my essence and my energies, like I'm a human and I can, as a human person, as a human hypostasis, I can deploy I can manifest the energies of the human nature. Let's say I'm typing on this keyboard, I'm doing something very human at this moment. So my human hypostasis, I have the power to manifest the human nature there. And in this manifestation, I can bring some lower beings into participation there, like my hands, for instance. I can bring my hands into typing on the keyboard, and an important point there is that when my ends participate in my energies, in my typing there, they can participate more or less. Like maybe I have a disease in my hand and they don't fully respond to how I'm typing. But if my ends are fully healthy and they fully participate in my typing, and if they fully participate in my energies, then my end is also more fully a hand. You know, it's a healthy hand. It does what it's supposed to do, and so on. So you have a notion not only of I am a human. I'm an institution of the human nature. I can manifest this in doing certain things, and I can bring lower things in such manifestations in my energies. And with this distinction, this allows Saint Maximus to do things, especially having to do with bodies, which Eugenia doesn't, and some things which seem very suspicious from a Christian point of view. So, for instance, Eugenia doesn't think that we had bodies before the fall. Mm-hmm. And also, on the other end of the spectrum, it's not clear in Eugenia's system why the incarnation was important. Why was it important that, let's say, the Logos became a body? And also, he doesn't talk much about how we can participate in this, how we can participate in the body of Christ, whereas it's all over the place if you read about theosis in St. Maximus, that divinization takes place within the body of Christ, or as Mary, you've been talking lately in your videos, in a community of Logos, it takes place within sort of really a body. So this is, those are all touch points which Eugenia doesn't, sometimes when you read the Periphysician, you can see it here and there, where he mentions the incarnation and the fact that the word became flesh and so on, but it's not clear why it matters, really. It doesn't give the sort of precise arguments which Maximus is able to give. And I think it will come down to this link between and how an essence, when it's initiated into a person, into a hypostasis, can then manifest itself at those different levels.
Can I ask you a question?
Yep.
What is the difference between what you're calling energies and what we would call works?
That's a good question. What do you mean by works, especially? What sort of examples will you have?
Well, like just what you said about like typing on the computer. It's like you're doing work, right? And isn't there etymologically a connection between the word energy and the word work?
It's not etymological, it's definitional. Energy is the capacity to do work within physics.
Okay, okay, that's what I thought. I knew there was some connection. So I guess my question is then, what's the difference between what you're describing when you talk about like typing on the computer or doing something that, it's like your essence becomes manifested through a work, or I don't see the difference between that and the word energy. I wonder why we're using the word. If energy is a capacity to do work, but you're talking about the doing, then why are we using the word, continuing to use the word energy instead of the word work?
Good point. One, the important thing is that, especially in the East, they will identify in a, I guess, in non-logical way, the hypostasis with the energies. So in the case of God, for instance, if you participate in God's energies, you do participate in God. So,
but you don't participate in God's essence. Is that the idea?
No, not in his essence. We humans never reach God's essence. We can participate to diverse degrees in his energies. So let's say even the mere fact that we exist is signifies that we're being held in existence by the ground of being. So we participate in the energies to this extent, but we can participate more fully. Let's say, like when I was talking about my hand, my hand, if it's sick and not responding properly, it's still part of, it can still participate in what I'm doing, but to a lesser degree than when it fully obeys, when it fully becomes part of me. And
but I'm interested in the participation the other way, JP.
Yeah.
Maybe Mary is too. I'm interested not so much how your hand can participate in things. I'm interested in is the relationship of participation between the dynamics, because that's what you would say in Aristotle, between the dynamics of your hand and your essence. Like your hand is part of your identity, such that if I cut your hand, you say, "Oh, you cut me," right? You don't say, right? And I'd be guilty of hurting you as a person if I damaged your hand. Is that what's being invoked here? That that I mean. I mean, they talk about the hand of God in the Bible, so we could even use that as a metaphor, perhaps. I mean, I'm trying to see what this does in terms of our participation in God. That's what I'm trying to get at. So the idea is we can interact with God's hand, and God's hand has a participatory identity with Him, but God's hand is not His essence. Is it something like that? I'm trying to understand what's going on.
Yes. So I'm not sure I see the point you just made about how you wanted to see it the other way around, in the way how my hand.
You were telling me how your hand could participate in the world, but I was interested in how your hand participates in your essence. Okay. I'm trying to get at the relation within God between His energy and His essence. What's the nature of that relations? Because there must be some metaphysical difference, because I can participate in God's energy according to you, but I can't participate in God's essence. So the relation can't be one of identity between God's energy and His essence, but it can't be one of disidentity, or then I can't enter into a relationship with God. That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah, that's a very deep question, and I suspect that this will have something deep to do as well with how Emergence reunites the four divisions of nature.
Sure.
Because ultimately, all the divisions do all together. There's a sense in which, let's say, the created, uncreated, the created, uncreating is part really of God itself. In being in God, it cannot exist outside of it, or it will just cease existing. So there has to be a relationship that's hard to articulate, and I think this is what they're pointing at with the essence energy distinction. But
so I mean, it's something like it's something like, and Jonathan was talking about this. The Neoplatonic idea that the hypostasis, right? It's not essentially identical to that with it. That's why it's a relationship of participation, right? The intellect, the realm of the forms, the eternal interpenetrating system of the forms in the Platonic sense, participates the one. It's actually a transitive verb, right? It participates the one. It proceeds and returns, but it is not identical to the one. And it sounds like you're saying that you see Maximus doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah, but I do think that also, as Jonathan said, that in Christianity, like, the most important thing is that the infinite is equal with the manifestation of the infinite. That you really do want to identify. God with His energies.
Okay. Now I see. So you're suggesting that the participation of God's essence into His energies, it does not have the diminishment in being that the Neoplatonic process of emanation has.
Yes.
I see.
Yes, that I would say that's really key. Yeah,
okay.
I would say that that's really key. So, and this is where I would think that we make the great distinction between the created and the uncreated. The God, the uncreated, and all of the creation, right? That okay, let me see how I can put this into words. So the things that are contingent, the things that are created, can participate to a greater or lesser extent in God's energies by cooperation, okay? Yes. And this would especially be true of the intelligent creation, which can choose to cooperate, right? And then, but it's not as though God is sending forth beings that are less and less and less Him down. I'm kind of losing the way to express it.
Okay.
Maybe JP kind of understands what I'm saying. We're not like everything that there's a sense in which everything that is created, from the highest angel to the, lowest, slug, to every, atom, is in a way equal in being creation, as contrasted to God, who is uncreated. Okay, so let me give you an example. This is something I thought of years ago, but it's just an illustration. So many years ago, I don't know if it was National Geographic, Scientific American, or what magazine it was, but they would have a page in there, and what they would be doing is showing you something at great magnification.
Yes.
Right, and then you would try to guess what the thing was, and you could never guess, really, because it would be so different from the thing that you saw if you looked at the thing. Okay, so one time they had an image that it looked like the surface of the moon, with all these craters and everything. It looked just that, like there were cliffs that you could fall over and all of that. And then, you tried to guess what it was. Well, it turned out that it was the surface of an egg. Okay, which seems so smooth to you when you hold it in your hand, right? Even though it might have slight texture, it doesn't look anything like it. It's got craters and cliffs on it. And I remember thinking, when I saw that, down here in the realm of creation, or down here on earth, we see so many differences, we like, even between human beings, and we're always looking at, who's at the top of the hierarchy and who's in the middle and who's at the bottom, and we see all these differences. But maybe, I remember having this thought, maybe from God's perspective, we're all equal, because I gotta turn off my email. Second, I forgot to close the window. So anyway, so does that make sense as an illustration of what I'm trying to say? That the difference, there's this absolute difference between the uncreated, between God, the ground of being, and all of creation. That there's a way in which all of creation is actually just that has the same status. It's not a diminishment, even though
I think there's definitely a diminishment just having to do with the fall. That's one thing.
Well, let's try to stay away from the fall for just a minute and just talk about it in terms of the creation for a minute, because we can always come back and talk about the fall,
So sorry, Mary, I want to make sure you're done.
Yeah, I'm done.
So I'm trying to get this. I think I'm getting a glimmer, but I'm not. It's not clear, because I'm trying to. And I mean, this was a point that Jonathan was also. He was trying to, emphasize that there's kind of that Christianity sees goodness throughout, whereas Neoplatonism sees a diminishment as things emanate.
Right.
Okay, and so. So there's that. Now, one of the things that, of course, for me, a deep so in Neoplatonism, you have the procession, you move from singularity, which is not the same thing as a single. It's kind of like the singularity of the Big Bang, right? It's that kind of, right? It's all intelligibility back to its ultimate unity, etc. Right? And then it proceeds out. But everything is also simultaneously returning, which right? But the big difference, I think, in Emergence for me, and why I'm so interested in, and give me a second, guys, and I'll try and connect these 2 points together. So I don't mean to trespass on your patience, right? For Plotinus, for example, there's the diminishment all the way down, right? And there's a sense in which the emergence isn't really the return isn't emergence in the sense I would talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. It's a return. Think of the language, right? So, for example, if I go down in Plotinus, I get at the bottom, which is pure, right? Pure lack of form, pure matter, and for Plotinus, that's pure evil, right? Mm-hmm. But what I see in Erigena is no, that's for him, right? That's the way you're explaining it too. I think you agree with it. That's the inexhaustible, right? Mm-hmm. And that's from which an emergence is just as, if you'll allow me this word, and I don't mean to trespass on your guys' space, but the emergence upward is just as sacred as the emanation down, mm-hmm. right? Because the emergence upward expresses the inexhaustible, in a sense, and then the emanation down expresses the ultimate unity and integrity of intelligibility. Mm-hmm. And both of those are worthy of sacredness. Is that?
Yes. And
another way, go on.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to mention the fall, just because when we...
Well, before we go into the fall, let me just say that instead of the up coming down and going back, there's another language we could use. We could use origin and telos, right? Well, telos is really the origin.
Right.
So we could talk about beginning and end, alpha and omega.
Yeah, I mean, I think... Yeah, I'm interested. Yeah, I mean, I think they should... I think the vertical ontological and the horizontal historical actually should be sort of triangulated, because in Erigena they're supposed to be triangulated into something that transcends both of them, in my understanding. So I think using both is good, but I think they pick out different aspects. I don't know if this is important, that point right now. I guess what I'm interested in is what Mary said first, and I also want to hold off before we get to the fall, if that's okay. So I'm trying to understand, Mary, because I can see, I was trying to capture the smoothness of the egg as one way in which it's sacred, because the smoothness points towards the oneness of the intelligibility. But the differences of the egg, is all those differences actually generate all of the capacity for things to emerge, for new things to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's also worthy of being thought of as sacred, just as much as the smoothness of the egg. The dappled, it's like Manly Hopkins, right? The dappledness of things is just as much a sacredness as the smoothness, if I can use your metaphor. Is that doing justice to what you were saying?
Yes, all creation is good.
Yes, but there, I'm trying to get that there's two different. I'm struggling with the language here. Go ahead, JP. I'm talking too much. Go ahead.
But I definitely agree with the two. The fact that there is emanation from God, from the ground of intelligibility, and emergence from the ground of being, and the two meet, the inexhaustible and the ground of.
When they don't meet, they completely interpenetrate.
Yeah, right.
They completely interpenetrate.
Yeah, and at every place where they meet, then things exist, and creation exists.
That's right, and that's the dialectic. That's the dialectic in creation. Yeah.
Yes, and this is why this is where participation can come in as well, because we can frustrate this ourselves if we do not participate in being properly. We can avoid the emergence from reaching what it should. Yes. And this is why I wanted to mention the fall and theosis also ultimately. I think that this could be one of the reasons why my end example was a bit messy at the beginning, because I'm not perfectly identified with my manifestations, and similarly, right now you can say that the emergence and the emanation are not in the proper relationship because we're after the fall. But the idea is that especially the human being, especially in the Erigena, has the role of working in this relationship between the ground of being and the ground of intelligibility. We have the before the fall and then after theosis, we have the role of mediating between the two. So there's sort of a fracture in being.
Yeah, I get that. And I think, and the point of the dialectic in the division of nature is to exemplify how we can come into greater conformity, not in what we say, but in what we in how we think and interact with each other. So it's more about our being, and that is how we can come into a better alignment with sort of the flow of the dialectic of being. I think that's deeply right. So here's what I wanted to say. I mean, and this is what was also going on with Jonathan, is for me, be charitable to me, guys. I'm trying. Okay, so in deep learning, which is, some of our best artificial intelligence, and it looks like how the brain, and this is, and I make use of it in relevance realization, and that's where Jonathan and I might have had a connecting point. What you see is you see the system cycling. You see the system cycling. So what it does is it does compression, and it tries to get what is invariant, and in that sense, eternally sort of one. And then it flows out to all the variations, right? And then they are gathered back up again. And that's, of course, the model of relevance realization, the model of evolution. And for me, right, I was thinking, oh, that's kind of interesting, because that might be a potential way of seeing something deeply analogous, but which is what you and I have been talking about, JP, and you and all three of us last time, Mary, is that there's something analogous. It's an Augustine or an Augustinian idea that, that sort of not the content of our ideas, but the very structural functional flow of our mind is something that reveals the deeper structure of reality. So
okay.
You can see the flow of relevance realization as deeply conforming to Gina's dialectic of being. That's where I saw as a potential connection point between Jonathan and I. Is that fair to say that? Yeah. Yeah. What did you want to say, Mary? I want to hear from you, please.
Well, I want to say that, I like all of this stuff. I've loved everything you've done with the relevance realization. Okay. So if you talk about, so there's something deeply analogous between our mind and the structures of reality.
Sure.
Deep structures of reality. And I would say, and also the structures of reality all the way up, like all the way up and all the way down, right? So like we may find that there, like even like the formation of crystals or something like that is
sure. I think the autopoiesis and relevance realization has a deep continuity with self-organization of the fire, etc. Yes, I think that. Yeah.
So down now, more like to JP's points about, well, this goes down, but also why wouldn't it continue to go up? And so then I have to come back to the question that's kind of like the point of tension between us, which has to do with why wouldn't that be mind there and a person, because it seems to me that we value mind.
Sure.
We value mind over matter. We value mind over matter because it's the mind that, to use Paul van der Klee's wording, right, colonizes the matter, right? So we value mind over matter. I'll give you an example. Like if someone injures me, let's say someone hits me and harms me in some way. Okay. So there's the physical reality of that thing happening, but my sense of that incident is going to vary greatly between whether that person accidentally hurt me or had the intention to hurt me, right?
Although,
the state of the mind, we value it over just the material reality.
So, I mean, in some senses, I understand you, but
so what I'm trying to get at is if we value mind over matter,
okay,
and if we can't go up above the human in value, then isn't it the case that we have to look and go, well, we're at the top. The humans are at the top because we're the ones with the minds, and we're the only ones with the minds and therefore we're at the top.
So, okay, now I see what you mean. Okay, so the idea is moral valuation. I mean, because there's other ways. There's because there's other circumstances where we give priority to the physical over the mental. Like if I'm causing you hunger, that's considered a greater crime than I'm just sort of insulting you and giving you a painful mental state, right? But I want to put that aside because I was misunderstood. I think the way I'm understanding you is saying the thing that we think is most inherently valuable in all of creation are people. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Well, or let's say persons. Yeah,
persons.
Okay,
right.
And so if when you talk about things coming down, it sounds like it's something above us. But how can it be above us if it's not a person? In what way is it above?
Well, I mean, it's above us in terms of, well, I want to go slowly here because there's many ways in which that could be answered. So I'll say one and then maybe give it, I mean, it's above us in that it's everything else is asymmetrically dependent on it, all right? So that means that if realness is actually is another thing that we intrinsically value, which I think we do, then something being more real in that sense, in that more of reality is dependent on it, would make it more valuable than me, even though it's not necessarily a person. That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say, but we value, I think there's things we do find intrinsically valuable other than persons. I think we find things being real, the realness of things is inherently valuable to us too. I mean, I think that's a great Platonic insight, that no matter what fulfills our desires, we have the meta desire that it's real. What fulfills our desires? Realness is we value realness for its own sake, right?
Mm-hmm. And so when you say that other things are dependent on this one or this being or whatever, I'm not sure what language you're using for it. When you say dependent for continued existence, dependent for the origin of existence, or
oh no, yeah. So I mean, it's a ground. As JP said, let's stay in Gina, not just pure Neoplatonism. It is simultaneously the ground of being and the ground of the intelligibility of being. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the sort. Everything is dependent. Everything I say is going to be over speaking here, but everything is dependent for it in terms of it being every being is dependent on it insofar as it's a being, and every way in which a being is intelligible is also dependent on it.
Mm-hmm.
So how does it? So then it must know intelligibility.
Plotinus, for example, argues that that's a mistake because the ground of intelligibility can't be an act of knowing, because the act of knowing depends on the principle of intelligibility. For example, knowing is about a relationship between a subject and an object, but the ground of intelligibility is what ultimately unites and makes possible the relationship between subjects and objects. So it can't itself be divided between subject and object. Mm-hmm. So it can't therefore be an act of knowing. The ground of intelligibility can't be an act of knowing any more than the ground of being can be a particular being.
Yeah, I think that's why in the East they put it in the energies rather than in the essence itself. And I think we can go back to, Jonathan said this even about just humans. No, it's not, let's say the fact that I am the instantiation of a human nature and you're the instantiation of a human nature that makes us conscious individually. It's the fact that we interact between two different human hypostases. It's in our manifestations that there is consciousness, that there is what we typically talk of as personhood. And I think it will be the same thing in the case of if we talk about the ground of being. It's in the East, they can remain apophatic about what happens in the ground of being itself, in its essence.
And there's a sense that I mean, I want to keep talking to you guys because it's great, but I don't want to dismiss that. I think there's a sense in which we should ultimately all recognize that there's an aspect of this before which we should have a kind of referential silence. I don't want to dismiss that aside. Let's keep talking, of course, because I think we're doing something useful here. But I just wanted to put that in because I think that's important to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a very wise thing to do, and that's why all that they will really need for classical theism, at least in the East, is that we can use the modern term of relevance realization in the manifestations of the ground of being, and we can remain apophatic about what happens within itself, let's say, the relationship between the ground of intelligibility and the ground of being, and what happens between the relationship of them, in themselves. I don't know. We won't reach this point anyways. So then it becomes more of a question of how is it that the ground of being manifests itself? Does it do it in a way that looks like relevance realization, that in a way that we would associate with personhood, or would it rather be something like emptiness, like the Buddhist claim, for instance?
Yeah, so I'd be happy with that. And so the way in which I could talk about that might upset you guys is I would say, well, of course, a non-theist would say that often we will enter into personal relationships, and perhaps entering into a personal relationship is a valuable way of disclosing certain aspects of the one, or the ground of being, the ground of intelligibility. I'm going to use the word one, but I'm going to be using it in Erigina's sense, not just in Plotinus's sense, because we need a term of reference here for what it is I'm talking about. And so I think the more important issue then might be what you want to say. I think there's a move you can make, and maybe I'll make it on your behalf, and you'll say, aha, but John, we were talking earlier about how the manifestations have a kind of, they participate the one in some way. So there's something, if the personal relationship participates the one, then there's something being disclosed about what the one is, even though it's not part of the essence of the one. Is that the kind of move you're trying to make? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
and
that's
then
very good.
The only remaining move that we may or may not make, and it's very obscure, it's sort of in like a medieval dispute in the East in like the 14th century, but the move is that the same sort of manifestations, which let's say we see between us and the one, could well hold within the one between let's say the ground of being and the ground of intelligibility. This is a door that could be open as well, that there could be a deep continuity between the manifestations we observe, between humans and the ground of, between humans and the one, and also within the one himself. But we can, I think lots of Christians would be happy to remain apophatic about this part.
Okay, so let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I sort of spoke on your behalf, and you said you thought it was charitable. Yep. So let's take like Vedanta as at least something that's officially supposed to be a non-theistic, because Brahman is impersonal. But Vedanta says that the individual gods, right, are the personal manifestations so that we can enter into personal relationships, but Brahman is itself, right, impersonal. So that's what I mean about, you can use all the language we're agreeing on here and then still ultimately say, because that's what Vedanta does, but ultimately non-theism, right? That was the point I'm trying to make.
Well, I think this accords well with, I don't know if you got to hear my last video, or Paul van der Klee's video where he talked about the metadivine realm. That many polytheistic systems also posited a metadivine realm, and the metadivine realm could be personal or could be impersonal, or could be a fight or a battle or a contest between
the fates. Right? Yeah, the fates are a pretty example. Yeah.
So, we know that when we are talking, like if we go back to classical theism, even when we're talking, say, about the Trinity, when we're talking about God, God as God, and God, the three persons in God, that we know we're talking analogously, analogously to person, and yet there's a relationship. So we're not, so the idea that, that God transcends the category of person is already part of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have such a problem with that. I think there's tremendous, how can I say it? There's a lot of utility, definitely, in a personal God in many, many ways. I mean, psychologically, for humans, there certainly is. Plus, if there is a real revelation, which we believe there is, that there is a revelation that God gave us to enter into this personal relationship with him. So we're not, we can grant many things, but at the end of the day, we're sticking with a God who is personal.
Sure.
But that's not to slight or to say that. That's not to make light of or not respect the experiences and the traditions of those who say this God is not personal, because even for those who have a non-person, or that the ground of being or intelligibility is not personal, because usually, in almost all cases, as far as I know, there are personal entities that come between the human person and that ground of being, such that, like as you said, that a relationship can form. And so we talked before about the ambiguity,
the Higgs society, right?
Taking that as seriously as possible, or as factually as possible. When we talk about how the structures of reality go all the way down and through, I think this applies even to our to how we relate to persons, in the sense that when we're in doubt as to whether there's a person there, when we have an ambiguous situation in life, we go for the person. For example, I use this example in one of my videos. If someone is going to knock down a building and they're in doubt as to whether there's a person there, they don't knock the building down. Or trying to think, I'd use it. Oh, a hunter out in the woods, if he sees a movement behind a tree and he's not sure if it's a deer or a person, he doesn't just shoot, because it doesn't matter if it's a person. So we opt for, when we have an ambiguous situation in life, we opt for person.
Okay, I think that's very good, Mary. And so I want to respond to that in depth. And maybe it will actually be a response that closes some distance. First of all, I just want to bring out that there was two parts to my argument. There was the ambiguity, right? And then there's also that there's no logical decidability for similarity. There's no algorithm that can say this is objectively more, X is objectively more similar than Y, because, well, if you remember the argument, any two objects are actually indefinitely similar to each other, or indefinitely dissimilar to each other logically. So there's no algorithmic, there's no logical, there's no way to give a deductive evidence or proof or decision procedure for similarity. So I just want to point out that it's both of those. So that means that actually puts a lot of weight on the pragmatic aspect of your argument. Do you see what I'm trying to say? You can't sort of say, here's the rule, and if you follow it, that will show that this is the correct analogy, which is not what you're doing. I just want to make it really clear though where we're playing, right? Okay, so the issue about the pragmatism is, again, so pragmatism is ultimately how things are relevant to us, and I'm sort of on record as saying I don't think there's anything that's ultimately always has priority and relevance. And so I do think we do make those kind of decisions, again, when we have moral concern. But when we have epistemic concerns, we sometimes go the opposite way. We say, for example, we made tremendous progress in disease when we stopped personalizing diseases and realized that they were created by these impersonal forces, bacteria, etc., things like that. When we stopped thinking of them as demonic possession, etc., we made tremendous progress, and we alleviated a lot of suffering. And so you can say, well, in that situation, it was actually going impersonal actually had great moral benefit too. And so the right thing to do there was to actually do what we did, which was to go impersonal, and thereby we were able to alleviate so much more suffering than when we treated the unknown thing as if it was a person. So again, see what I'm not trying to one up you, Mary. I'm just trying to say
no, it's good. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm trying to say, I think there's context in which you're right. There's context in which we say there might be a person there, and that's what I should do. But there's other contexts in which it turns out, sort of taking the risk that it's an impersonal thing has actually had huge moral benefit for us. That's why I tried to give that example.
Okay, well, what about in the arena of gratitude and thanksgiving?
Okay, this is another one of your good arguments. I hope you take that I'm responding to you with some good arguments as indication that I think you're giving good arguments. And I hope that's understood. I want everybody who's hearing me to hear that. So I thought a lot about that because, and you mentioned, I think very correctly, that the expression of gratitude is part of my daily practice, for example. And I was trying to think about, so the idea is, first of all, I want to make sure I understand you. So this is not a challenge or criticism. This is an open question. Is the idea that part of the phenomenology that needs personhood is that people experience deep gratitude, and it's not to another human person, and it's not to a collective, a bunch of you, but there's a sense of gratitude. It's real, and there needs to be what word do I want to use?
Someone.
There needs to be there needs to be a someone to whom the gratitude is directed. And so what I need, my question is, what's the nature of there needs to be a someone? Is it the idea that if there isn't someone there, my gratitude will sort of dissipate and be frustrated? I'm trying to get the phenomenology that you're pointing to.
Well, I come back to if there's a person versus if there's not a person. So for example, which would be the better option to say thank you to a person who is not there, or to fail to thank a person who is there?
Well, so I get your point. We would generally say it would be better to fail when there's no person there than fail when there is a person there. I get that, and I want to acknowledge that. But here, Spinoza famously said in the Ethics that the wise man desires nothing less than to have God love him in return. Because if he is desiring for God to love him in return, then he's not actually loving God for being God. He's not actually loving God as a pure expression of the goodness of being. And so,
well, what are you loving? Or are you not loving a who?
No, Spinoza's God is much more. I think you could make a really strong case that because it's God or nature. Right, for what Spinoza means, the things that we have separated in terms of God and creator and God and nature are actually ultimately just one thing, God or nature. And that is what he means by God. And so he's not loving a who. He thinks he's arguing that if we actually care about the truth as truth, then we should love the ground of being without desiring that it love us in return, because only the love for it without wanting the love in return is actually the love of truth. Because if it's anything else, I'm not loving it because it's true, I'm loving it because of what it's doing for me. That was sort of the idea.
Well, you know, in Christianity, we do say that we love God for who He is.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a much more less developed form of spirituality to be loving God because of what He does for me. That kind of thing.
So
but that God is deserving of love for who He is.
That's yeah. So okay. So let's at least say there's something close between what your Christianity and what Spinoza is saying. Well, and then as long as what I am loving is good, like the truth is good, then can I not love it and be grateful for it without it being a person?
Well, I mean, there's a difference between grateful for something and grateful to someone for the thing.
Yeah, but why okay, but I acknowledge there's a difference, but our question is, which one of those is the one that is happening in, for example, in my phenomenology, right? I experience deep gratitude for the goodness of the ground of being, for the ways we've been talking about today, and for the ground of intelligibility. And I don't desire, because I'm a deep devotee of Spinoza, I don't desire that it love me in return. In fact, for me, that would be a diminishment of both what my love is directed to and of my love.
Well, I understand that. I mean, I understand where you're coming from.
Well, thank you for saying
that. Okay, so where do these things you're grateful for come from then? I mean, we get into questions about, you know, basically cosmological arguments about that. So the part of the reason for the ground of being is also the origin of being in Christian thought. So,
yeah.
And one of the reasons we say that there has to be, and this is apart from any other distinctions about God, like Trinity or anything like that, is that there was a willful decision to bring things other than God into being. That makes sense what I'm saying? That there was just God, and now there's other things other than God that have a real existence, that really have an existence. Not that they're not held in existence by God, but that they're given by God a certain kind of freedom to be actual, to make things happen in the universe, and to be causes in their own right.
Right.
Secondary causes, but that the first cause is a decision. So it seems to me in your ontology you're lacking an explanation for, as was it Leibniz who said, why there is something instead of nothing?
Okay, well, there's two questions here, and one is sort of how did it all get started question. I'd like to put that aside because I think that's just going to get us into arguments about, you know, a scientific origin story and a non-scientific origin story that I don't know if we could make much progress on that. The other one that I'm trying to get, because I think maybe this is one of the reasons why Emergence was thought to be a heretic. I mean, because Emergence thinks that God's creation ultimately doesn't leave God. That God's creation is ultimately an expression of and a way and continuous with God's self-knowledge. And that sounds to me also like what you guys were saying earlier about the manifestations of God are still God. And so I'm not quite seeing what you want me to give up, because I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm not sure that you gave it up earlier. Anyway, I mean.
Well, I guess that it's when.
Go ahead, Gina.
In the
Go
way,
ahead, JP.
In the way in which the ground of possibility, the ground of being, will constrain himself into making things exist, then the question will be, in this manifestation, is there how much room, I guess, maybe is there left to change to chance? How much relevance realization is there guiding it towards something? Because I could see, if we just leave it there, I could see this I could see this going either way personally, where if we just take those two ideas that, well, we know that there's real possibility in the world, there is real emergence of things, and we also know that there is real constraints on those possibilities, and that the world exists between those two. If all we have is this, it's sort of an empirical question to see where will all this meeting of emergence and emanation lead? Where will this end to? Maybe this meeting is conscious, maybe it's not. If that's all we have, I think it could go both ways.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I want to acknowledge that, because I think we're all coming at this, and one of the reasons I like talking with you guys, we're all coming at this with humility, and we're all acknowledging we don't have arguments that foreclose or anything like that. So yeah, I see that too, what you just said, and I do like the idea. That's why I switched from similarity to conformity. That I can put aside my worry about similarity if there is a sense in which, right, my mind can conform to reality, not in the content of mind, but in, like I say, in the very structural functional flow of my mind. It is conforming to the structural functional flow of reality. And that to me is a powerful thing.
I think that's very close to theosis, by the way. This participation.
I think so too. I think that's what theosis is as well. I think all of this is good, and what you just said. I guess even though I've been responding to Marianne, challenging her, I also respect her concerns. I keep asking this question, and I'm not trying to be badgering. Even after we do this, I have a sense that you guys, I sound like some sort of alien species, that you guys have a sense that calls you beyond where, if you'll allow me to personalize this, where I am, and like I say, there's some, and I use this term very broadly. There's something in your phenomenology, and Mary's happy to use that term. I know.
Maybe I can tell you a story.
Okay.
Recently, I spent a few months in France earlier this fall, and I had the chance to go to a special mass that was organized for all the students in Paris, and there were like 3,000-4,000 of us maybe. And this was in a fairly big church, an old church, all made of stone. Beautiful building. So we were so many people, we couldn't even really sit down. We could either sit right on the floor or stand up because we were so packed. And there were lots of also clergy there. There was like a few bishops, several priests. There were also servers and so on. I know there was a great choir, lots of incense and all that stuff. So it was a very involved, lots of people very intricately involved. And I remember there was a precise moment in the mass where I looked up. We were singing some hymns. I don't remember which ones. And there's a very sort of living continuity in what we sing there. There are some songs we sing are like hundreds, or I don't know, maybe even more than 1,000 year old. Some are in Greek, some are in Latin. So there's
deep historical depth to them, right?
Yeah, that people have been saying from the beginnings of Christianity, but we also have some more modern songs. But the precise moment where I remember was we were singing one of those, and in unison with lots of people around me. I had people I loved around me, all combining our voices into one, while the priests and the bishops are also upwards, and we're all looking at them towards the altar, and we were also incensing. And I sort of looked up, and I saw this old rock ceiling with a thick layer of incense that had raised up, and this felt really maybe otherworldly would be putting it maybe too strong, because it more felt like I was as much maybe in the Middle Ages as I was in 2019. It really did feel like, when I was talking especially earlier about Saint Maximus and his view of theosis occurring within the body of Christ, where this this movement of between the ground of intelligibility and the ground of being, which was sort of broken by the fall, and then the idea is that when Christ became man, he went all the way down to the bottom of things, to the ground
Jonathan's
of
point.
and then when he raised everything back up in a way that is deeply continuous between heaven and earth, between the ground of being and the ground of possibility, because he's both the Son of Man, having emerged from the earth, and also the Son of God, having come all the way from
emanated down.
heaven.
Yes, yep.
Yeah,
I get that. Yeah, that's very powerful. Yep.
And then he raised us all up by allowing us to enter into communion with them. So he became very close to 12 people, made them his friends. And then when after he died, those people, those apostles founded churches. So they made loving connections with people under them, and this established a hierarchy. Ultimately, I would say between heaven and earth, and also a strong movement in history in which I can take part. And by entering into this, I get a strong sense of theosis, where I participate in something that is much larger than me, that is not just about me, and that makes me automatically want to love more everyone around me.
Sure, and I think that's deeply important, but I've had those experiences, and many people have had those experiences in which, again, they feel deep self-transcendence, they feel the affordance of wisdom, connection, communion, they feel connected to something much greater themselves, and many of those people don't come out of that with having a sense of encountering a being or encountering God or anything like that. And they can have, I mean, I had an experience very similar when I went to Delphi, and I stood in front of the Omphalos, and people have been there for millennia, and you have the part of it goes down into the ravine, into the earth, and part of it reaches up into the sky, and you get the sense of the continuity, and you know that Socrates had come, the people have come here and asked about Socrates, and all of that is there, and you get this, I've had, I think, even a sense of being called beyond myself very deeply connected to the emanation and the emergence. This is why I talk about this stuff, because I've had these experiences. So again,
this maybe your ontology really is rich enough to encompass the old phenomenology, and that's another possibility, because ultimately I think this is one point, especially when we talk about the personalism of the ground of being. I suspect maybe now that I may be even a bit closer to you than to Mary, because maybe I think I was too rash in saying that lots of Christians would be happy with the deep continuity of relevance realization up until the ground of being. I think in the East, that's true. Most Christians would be happy to leave it that, well, God is both person and beyond person. Even maybe the idea that, well, the Father in himself is only doing relevance realization with the Son and not really maybe within himself. I don't know, maybe you could play with this.
Well, I mean, he is called the Logos, and that would work. That would go very nicely with what you just said. Maybe this is better left to particular theologians. I mean,
I want to ask you a question, John. Can I?
Please, Mary. I just want to acknowledge that I do feel like we got a little closer, all three of us, in an important way. And I don't mean just affectionately. That's happening as well. But I just meant, I think, JP, you often use the metaphor of bridge building. I think the chasm was less chasmous that the bridge has to go across, if I could put it that way.
Yeah.
Please, Mary.
Okay. I really like all the stuff that you've said about the way that human beings are prone to, that the machinery of relevance realization can be hijacked, that they're prone to these perennial problems, and how the religious traditions have honed the psychotechnologies to help them to deal with that.
Yes.
Okay?
I think that.
Did I say all that correctly?
Yes, you said that very well. You often interpret me very well.
So here's my question. Here's a question, though, that I have, is that when I hear you talk about the purpose of religion as being to for wisdom, as a home for wisdom.
Wisdom and agape, because I argue that at the end too.
Okay. I think what I think about that as a Christian is that that's not the primary purpose of our religion. And I can't really speak that deeply about other religions, but I'm sure this is true for Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, and for Christianity, is that for us, the primary purpose of the religion is worship. And the wisdom, whatever the wisdom effects on the human person are, that we would see them as a byproduct of the worship. So that, classically worship is seen as the virtue of justice as applied to the relationship with the divine.
Does that mean treating the divine appropriately? Is that what you mean?
Appropriately, in the according, if you want to put it in a crude way, giving God what he deserves.
Sure.
And then we carry that further in the Christian tradition and say we can't give God what he deserves, so we have to. So Jesus comes in to give himself to us so that we can give him in a sacrificial way through the Eucharist back to the Father, so that then we are giving God what he really deserves. And so, but that the virtue of justice in the soul, or righteousness, the same word is, the word is the same, translated sometimes righteousness, sometimes justice, is that by developing that righteousness in the soul through doing the worship, that is what then I would say the other wisdom things follow from that. The other orderings of the soul follow from that. But the primary purpose of our religion is not, I'm saying this because you talk about the religion that's not a religion, and
Sure.
the wisdom and getting the wisdom
and the meaning
but that's I just wanted to say that we don't see that as we don't see getting wisdom as the primary purpose of our religion. Does that make sense? And I'm not trying to say that anything that you've said about it is not correct.
No,
just
I get that.
Add this extra element that it seems like a bit of a truncated view of our religion to say, well, the purpose is to gain wisdom. Is that?
Sure, and I get that. I want to ask you about it. I mean, I could cite some biblical stuff like, wisdom is the principal thing from the book of Proverbs. So
right.
So you're right. And
I'm not saying that wisdom is not high up there as a priority, just that it's not the top priority
I want to be fair to you.
Of the religion.
So let's do so if you'll allow me a way of talking about this, because I need a way of translating this into, the phenomenology, because I don't want it just to be a circle of doctrine. I'm not saying you're saying that. So what I'm doing, I'm trying to translate it. Okay.
Right.
So part of what you might be saying is part of my phenomenology is I feel called to worship, and that being called to worship, I take to be the primary thing of my religion. And that
I wouldn't even just say call, but that I sense, we talked about creatureliness as part of the sense of the numinous, that as a creature in relation to the Creator, I am obligated to worship. That to not worship is to not be fully a creature.
But that sounds to me like the ultimate standard is, again, the fullness of your being. That you can't come into a fullness of being unless you're into the right relationship with God. So, for example, this is tricky. So, you say you are. I'm trying to get above, I was trying to convey that with the sense of being called, in the sense that this is the right thing for me to do, right? That it's appropriate and right that I should treat what's ultimate. I mean, maybe Paul Tillich's language, that I should only, I have to treat the ultimate with ultimate concern, and anything less than ultimate concern is not treating it as ultimate. I'm trying to use language that I can sort of make work that's not specific to Christian doctrines. So is it something like that? Because I get that. So you've heard me talk about the difficulty with idolatry is we treat something that's not ultimate as if it's ultimate, and then that radically disconnects us from reality, and that's a fundamental loss of meaning. Because remember, I don't mean meaning as semantic meaning, I mean connectedness to what's most real. And so it sounds to me like what you're saying, I'm sorry, is that, well, what worship means is I want to realize the most relevant connection to what's ultimate, and part of that means that I should always be treating it as if it's ultimate. Is that right?
Well, yes, I should be treating God as ultimate. I should be treating him in that way.
But so other religions do that. I mean, right? So and other, I mean, so for example, Buddhism. Buddha said, everything that I do is for the ultimate concern of nirvana, right? Everything is in the service of this, and it's not in the service of him, right? It's that only in the relationship to nirvana will human beings achieve enlightenment, which is the Buddhist way of trying to say the best possible life they could achieve. And to use your order of causation, right? The wisdom is ultimately in the service of enlightenment. Wisdom is ultimately in the service of realizing nirvana. So that seems to me structurally the case in something at least deeply structurally analogous in other religions. Is that?
I'm not familiar enough with other religions.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to put.
No, and that's fine. No problem. I have many holes in my education.
Well,
but,
we all do.
But I just want to say that if you ask, what is Christianity? And so there are some Christians who would say, if you ask them, what is Christianity about? They'll say, well, it's about getting saved. Yeah. But that's a rather truncated view of Christianity. It really is about, that giving God what is due him. And then, like I said, we know we can't, because of our fallenness, give God what is justly due him, the praise and the worship that is justly due him. So he has made that possible for him. Now, that's one part of it, but that's the most important part. And I would say that shows at least in the Catholic and Orthodox churches, in that the divine liturgy or the Mass is, the Eucharist is, as we Catholics say, the Orthodox would agree, the source and summit of our faith. That is the sacrifice provided to us to give back to God by Christ, by which all the other things come: the wisdom, the agape, the everything.
Okay, that's good.
Right.
So I guess
right?
the difference maybe is that in the way in which we can participate in the ground of being, maybe it's closer to the body, or closer to matter within Christianity, where it's not the way we confirm with the relevance, with the cosmic relevance realization, is not just an effort on our part to
to conform.
Yeah, it's not just an effort on our part. We also think that God reaches down, that he became that the manifestations of the ground of being sort of don't just sort of do the bare minimum maybe of sustaining the world into existence so that things can emerge and so on, but and this would get probably into the point of miracles, which we sort of alluded a bit to last time we talked, but that and this would tie in with the phenomenology, where in the phenomenology of Christianity, maybe we give a greater part of, we acknowledge more that maybe the effort that being does for us, that the ground of being does towards us. Do you think that's fair?
Is that fair to me or fair to Mary? Who are you asking?
Well, to everyone, basically.
I mean, I feel like you shifted ground away from Mary a bit. I think Mary was saying something like, independent of whatever it might have done for us, the ultimate is deserving of being treated as ultimate. And then, but that's how I put it. And then I heard Mary saying, oh, yeah, John, but something more. There's, and I'm trying to put my, is it something like a sense of service? I'm trying to get what's, because not all religions are worship religions, right? So the Buddhists don't worship nirvana, but they think it's ultimate and should be treated ultimately.
Right, but that's why I'm saying that it's I'm saying that we have a disjunction between. Okay, I hear, because when I hear you talking about religion, yes. And like I say, what you're saying about religion being these, containers for the set of psychotechnologies by which we gain wisdom, which I think is all true. Leaves out something in Christianity, I believe also in Judaism, although I don't know that much about how Judaism sees itself at the now versus how the ancient Jews saw themselves.
Well, it's also leaving something out of Islam in the sense of submission to God, because that's what Islam means.
Right. So, okay. But what I'm saying is that it's leaving out in Christianity the concept of worship as that worship is what, what is the church for? It's for worship. Now, beyond that, of course, there's many other things. There is the wisdom, there is the agape, there is the community, there is the
and there is that by their fruits you shall know them too, right?
Right. There's all that. But what it's for is worship. That's why when Christ establishes a church, he does it at that Eucharistic sacrifice with his disciples. It's the core thing.
I guess maybe this is part of it then. And so I want to tread very lightly, and I have to go soon, guys. But so you want to, I'm totally. I mean, I think it's the Neoplatonic idea. It's in Plotinus. We have to treat the ultimate ultimately, and like I said, that's clearly in other religions. And then there's something more you want to add here about. It's not just relating to what's ultimate appropriately. There's a sense that God needs to be given things. Is that what you're saying? Because that sounds sort of futile to me. Because I don't think God needs anything. That would undermine everything we've been talking about. How everything is right. So God doesn't need that.
Should it be that God sort of the Son gives something to the Father with us, that we can participate in what God gives himself in this sense? Is that sort of what you're pointing at, Mary?
Well, remember when we were talking, and I don't know, we did this, and also when I was talking to Karen, talking about a lot of times when we talk as Christians, we talk about Jesus loving us, how much Christ loved us, that he sacrificed himself for us and all, but that the primary love of Christ was the Father, that it's his love for the Father is what was most in his top priority, even over and above his love for us, that it was out of obedience to his Father, out of love for his Father. So that it's the love between the Father and the Son that is really what creates everything, because it's the creation is for the Son. It's for that the Son would have something to give to the Father. So it's what creation is for the Father and the Son is a way that the Father and the Son express their love for one another, and then draw us into that love that they have for one another.
And we've been speaking Christianese here, but we can translate it in terms of the ground of being and the ground of intelligibility. sort of gifting themselves to one another through us.
But then we're back to what we were talking about before, and I think we might have lost something in the circle, because I've already said that I think part of what I was arguing for when I was arguing for wisdom and religio is to fall deeply in love with being for its own sake. I mean, that's why I invoke Spinoza.
And how would that? I would say as a Christian. So let's see if we can do the translation back and forth. So I would say as a Christian that to fall in love with God is then to want to give to God the praise that God deserves. But God knows that I cannot do that. And so God provides for me the means to do that. Okay? That's the sacrifice of Christ. There's many other things accomplished by that, and you know that in Christian theology, but I'm just sticking with that one.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say that you're making an exclusive claim. You totally take that totally for granted.
Okay. So, what did you say just before? Falling. So my question then would be, okay, so you have fallen in love with being. Okay. So
with the ground of being. Yeah.
With the ground of being, how do you express, and this is not like an argument, it's just like a, back and forth to understand.
Yeah.
So how do you express your love for the ground of being? How would you say that works in your?
Well, it works. So if it depends what you mean. I mean, it would be analogous to you come upon the Grand Canyon and you realize there's something above and beyond you, and you say, ah. You express awe, you express, right, reverence. Or like when I'm listening to I'm only using this as an analogy because we're trying to talk here. So I'm using aesthetic analogies. I'm listening to perhaps, the Seventh Symphony by Beethoven, and I feel tremendous. It causes me to sense a depth of things, and I love that depth. I just feel the love of that depth, and I appreciate in both the senses of value and understand and grow, because appreciate means all of those, and I appreciate it very, very profoundly. That's what I do.
So I kind of get it. So because to you the ground of being is not personal, then just merely having the personal experience that you're having of appreciating, of feeling connected to it that way.
Deeply.
But then we get back to if you know the ground of being as personal, you can understand then there would be some phenomenologically different responses to a person versus the non-personal.
I get that. I get that. I totally acknowledge and understand, I think, that you want to say in worship, I'm doing something other than what you're doing, John. But what I'm trying to get from the other way, but that's after you've concluded that the ground is personal, which to me is to get the cart before the horse. I want to know what it is. And maybe this is where you have to ultimately point towards revelation or something. I want to know what it is in the phenomenology that then first that calls you to attribute the personhood. I don't want to say personality because that's the wrong word. Such that worship makes sense to you, right? My question isn't what. Sorry, I just want to finish my point, Mary. Just in a sentence, right? My question isn't what follows from you treating it as a person. My question was, what leads you to treat it as a person?
Okay, so I would say presence.
Presence. You get it. So you get a sense of a presence of a person.
Yes.
And then I don't.
Okay.
And so that's what that, and not because in fairness to me, I wasn't around a lot of people who claimed that and tried to get me to, like, they brought me up to try and experience that and feel that. So if that's what it comes down to, then I have nothing to say to you. And I don't mean in the reticent, I'm pulling away. I still want to be in relationship and communion with you. It's just, I don't know what to say there.
Yeah. So because there is the revelation, there is the ontological arguments about the creation being a decision of a person. Mm. There is all of that, but then there is the sense of presence, which I think JP was kind of hinting at himself. So there is all of that. That's why I say that when I'm hearing you talk about what religion is for, I feel a little bit like it's not totally grasping what we're experiencing within our religious experience. However, that's not to say that I would in any way impugn the endeavor to bring as much wisdom to people and as much meaning to people as possible, but that I think Christians are still going to be there. We're still going to be around, and we're still going to be saying, there's a person here we want you to get to know. We'll still be saying that to people, and many of those people will get to know that person. They will have that experience of presence, and it will be transformational for them in ways that you would approve of.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. I guess one thing to say back is I was not trying to speak about what Christianity was, because I think it's fair for me to say that there are things that are bona fide religions, axial religions, world religions, in which that sense of the presence of a person is not felt or valorized within the religion. And so I was trying to speak as to what I think, because I'm ultimately in the series, I'm trying to be a scientist. I'm trying to find what are the universal principles of this phenomena. That doesn't mean that that's not to dismiss everything that we've been talking to, or the decision point that we came to. I think there's a way in which, Christians should keep doing what you're doing, but I wanted to understand why, for me, if I'm trying to talk about religions and not Christianity, that can't be a defining feature for me.
Right. Yeah. I understand that, but I just wanted to make the point that that's kind of a.
Do you think I've ever disrespected Christianity?
No, not at all. Although I do think maybe in his conversation that I saw with you today that Jordan Hall was a little bit dismissive of the value of vows.
Yeah.
But that might be a nit I need to pick with him sometime. He's such a great character. I thought when I read the title of your video with him, I thought where you had the two numbers, the Roman numeral. I thought it was just an LL. I thought, then I realized, oh no, it's a Roman numeral. I thought he's making his name smaller and smaller all the time. He's such a great character. And I was listening to the conversation. I was outside and I was listening, and when you were saying to him how much you liked what he did, and you were both laughing, I was just laughing right along with you.
He is becoming a really an important friend for me, and an important colleague.
Yeah, I think he's a valuable partner in the project that you're attempting. And I'd like to ask some more questions when we talk again about how you see certain practicalities in a societal way, how you would deal with certain practicalities of your project.
And other people have been asking me that. I've done a whole bunch of interviews around the sort of societal aspects, and some of that will be available, and maybe you get a chance to listen to some of it. I don't want to be presumptuous, and then we could circle back around to it, because I'm very happy to talk with you two again. I should go, guys. I was supposed to stop at 8:45, but I didn't want to stop because I felt that, like, Mary and I were triangulating to sort of a really crucial, and so I will acknowledge, I guess maybe formally and explicitly here, that that is the piece of the phenomenology that, at least with reference to Christianity, or maybe the Abrahamic religions is fair, that is not part of my experience, and not for lack of people trying to give it to me either. So I don't know what that means, but yes, now I see what it is, I think, you have in your experience, and how you have it in your experience, and why you place the value you do upon it. So I think you have answered my question in that way, Mary. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. It was great.
Yeah,
thanks, JP.
Yeah, thanks to you both. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, guys. I was wondering if this time, in addition to it being on your channels, both of you, you could send me it, and I could also upload it to my channel.
Yeah, I can send it to the both of you, probably sometime tomorrow morning.
That'd be fantastic. I'm at a conference, speaking at a conference tomorrow, so that'll be fine for me. So okay. We will. Well, I'm sure we will all talk again. I enjoyed this thoroughly, and thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's, affection and respect and charity and entering into good faith discussion. I deeply appreciate it, and I'm thankful for it.
Yeah, and thank you both for your work as well.
Thank you, JP. Bye. Good night.
Bye, guys. Bye, guys.